When my daughter told me I wasn't rich enough to attend her wedding at the prestigious Grandview estate, I smiled and said I understood completely. What she didn't know was that I'd owned the venue for 15 years. The next morning I made one phone call. By noon, her perfect wedding had vanished into thin air. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The champagne flute slipped from Amanda's manicured fingers, crystals shattering against the marble floor of our family room. Golden liquid spread across the Persian rug like spilled sunlight, but her eyes never left the bank statement in my hands. "Dad, you can't be serious," she whispered, her voice carrying the same disbelief I'd heard when she was 7 and learned that Santa Claus wasn't real. "These numbers can't be right." Derek lounged in the leather armchair that had cost more than his car, his expression shifting from smug confidence to something resembling concern. The wedding planning documents scattered across our coffee table suddenly looked different in the afternoon light streaming through our bay windows. "Which numbers concern you, Amanda?" I asked quietly, not moving from my position by the mantel where her graduation photo sat next to her mother's portrait. "The ones showing your net worth," she stammered, reaching for the papers with trembling hands. "I thought you were just comfortable, not wealthy." Derek cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the sudden tension. "Mr. Hartwell, Amanda and I have been planning this wedding based on certain assumptions about family contributions." Assumptions. The word hung between us like smoke from an extinguished candle. For 6 months. They'd been making assumptions about my financial capabilities while simultaneously excluding me from meaningful participation in their wedding planning. "What kind of assumptions, Derek?" I settled into my reading chair, the one Amanda had tried to convince me to replace because it didn't match their vision of sophisticated living. Amanda's face flushed the same shade as her expensive blush. "We assumed you'd contribute what you could afford, which we thought was maybe $5,000 or $10,000. $5,000 or $10,000. I looked around the room they'd dismissed as middle-class suburban, taking in the original Monet sketch above the fireplace, the handcrafted Italian furniture, the Persian rugs that had cost more than most people's cars. "And what did you plan to contribute?" I asked conversationally. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his designer jeans squeaking against the leather. "Well, my family is handling the major expenses. The venue, catering, flowers, music. We're talking about $100,000 celebration." "The Grandview estate," I said quietly. "Beautiful choice." Amanda's eyes lit up with the first genuine enthusiasm I'd seen from her in months. "You know it? Isn't it incredible? Derek's parents insisted on the best. 300 guests, 7-course dinner, live orchestra. It's going to be the social event of the season." "Derek's parents insisted," I repeated. "And my role in this social event of the season?" The enthusiasm died as quickly as it had appeared. Amanda exchanged a glance with Derek, the kind of wordless communication that said they'd discussed this exact scenario. "Dad, you have to understand," she began, her voice taking on the patient tone she'd used when explaining why she needed a more expensive college. "This wedding represents Derek's family's social standing. The guest list includes senators, business leaders, people from our social circle." "Our social circle," I said, "which apparently doesn't include me." Derek leaned forward, his expression earnest with the practiced sincerity of someone accustomed to managing difficult conversations. "Mr. Hartwell, it's not that we don't want you there, but the reality is that this level of society has certain expectations. Dress codes, social protocols, conversation topics that require a specific background." "What Derek's trying to say," Amanda interrupted, "is that you might feel out of place. You're a simple businessman, Dad. These people discuss art acquisitions, international investments, cultural philanthropy. You talk about construction projects and small-town politics. Simple businessman." The phrase landed like a physical blow. 40 years of building an empire they knew nothing about, reduced to a dismissive categorization that justified my exclusion from my daughter's wedding. I see, I said, my voice remaining steady despite the anger building in my chest. So my invitation to witness my only daughter's marriage is contingent on passing some kind of social acceptability test. It's not a test, Amanda protested, but her voice lacked conviction. It's just reality. Derek's mother has spent months crafting this guest list. Every person represents a strategic social connection. Strategic social connection. I stood up slowly, my 62-year-old joints protesting after sitting in one position too long. And what kind of strategic social connection does your father represent? The silence stretched until Derek cleared his throat again. Perhaps we could arrange for you to attend the ceremony itself, but skip the reception? That way you'd witness the actual wedding without the social complications of the dinner. Skip the reception, I repeated. The celebration, the dancing, the toasts? Amanda's face crumpled with what might have been genuine emotion. Daddy, please don't make this harder than it has to be. This wedding is my dream. But it's also an investment in Derek's career. His family's connections could set us up for life. And my presence at the reception would somehow damage that investment? Not damage, Derek said quickly. But it might create awkward moments. Questions about your background, your business, your social affiliations. It's easier if we can control the narrative. Control the narrative. I walked to the window overlooking our backyard, where Amanda had played as a child on the swing set I'd built with my own hands. The same hands they now considered too rough for their refined social gathering. What narrative would you prefer to control? I asked without turning around. That I married into a family of appropriate social standing, Amanda said quietly. Derek's parents have already expressed concerns about our compatibility. If they see that my father doesn't fit their expectations. She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. My presence might jeopardize her marriage to Derek, whose family's wealth and connections represented everything she decided she wanted in life. I understand, I said finally, turning back to face them. You'd prefer that your father not attend your wedding reception because his presence might embarrass you in front of people whose opinions matter more than his feelings. That's not fair, Amanda protested, tears forming in her eyes. This isn't about choosing between you and them. It's about making practical decisions for our future. Practical decisions, I agreed, like marrying someone whose family judges people based on social credentials rather than character. Derek's face hardened. My family judges people based on compatibility and shared values. There's nothing wrong with wanting to maintain certain standards. And what standards does your family maintain, Derek? Excellence, he said simply. In business, in society, in personal relationships, we associate with people who share our commitment to achievement and refinement. Achievement, I repeated. What achievements qualify someone for inclusion in your social circle? Derek straightened, clearly comfortable discussing his family's accomplishments. My father built his financial services firm from a small regional company into a national powerhouse. He sits on 3 corporate boards and chairs the Cultural Foundation downtown. My mother is president of the Symphony Guild and organizes charity events that raise millions for important causes. Impressive, I acknowledged. And they've determined that I lack comparable achievements? They've determined that you operate in a different sphere, Amanda said diplomatically. Construction and local business versus finance and cultural leadership. Construction and local business, I mused. That's how you describe my work? Dad, you own a small construction company, Amanda said with exaggerated patience. It's honest work, but it's not the same level as Derek's family's enterprises. Small construction company. I looked at my daughter, 26 years old, college-educated, engaged to marry into what she considered high society, and realized that she knew absolutely nothing about the man who had raised and supported her entire life. You're right, I said quietly. My work is very different from Derek's family's enterprises. Relief flooded Amanda's face. I knew you'd understand. This doesn't mean we love you any less. It just means we need to be strategic about the wedding guest list. Strategic, I agreed. And you've determined that strategy requires excluding me from the reception. Not excluding, Derek corrected. Repositioning. You'll witness the ceremony, participate in the meaningful part, but avoid the social complications of the reception. The social complications of having a father present at his daughter's wedding celebration. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Amanda wiped her eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than most people spent on lunch. I'm sorry it has to be this way, she whispered, but this wedding represents everything Derek and I want for our future. We can't let anything jeopardize that. I understand completely, I said, my voice carrying a calm certainty that seemed to surprise them both. You've made your priorities perfectly clear. Derek studied my face, perhaps sensing that my acceptance had come too easily. You're not angry? Why would I be angry? I asked. You've explained the situation logically. Derek's family has certain social standards. My presence at the reception might compromise your standing with people whose approval you value. The practical solution is for me to absent myself from the celebration. Thank you, Amanda said, her relief evident. I knew you'd understand eventually. I understand perfectly, I confirmed. When is the wedding? 3 weeks from Saturday, Derek answered. 2 o'clock ceremony at the Grandview Estate, followed immediately by the reception. The Grandview Estate, I repeated. I'm familiar with the venue. It's incredible, Amanda gushed, apparently forgetting that I wouldn't be attending the reception there. 5-star catering, crystal chandeliers, marble ballroom, gardens that overlook the valley. Derek's parents spare no expense when it comes to family celebrations. How fortunate for you, I said. I'm sure it will be everything you've dreamed of. They left an hour later, Amanda kissing my cheek with the casual affection of someone whose conscience had been cleared, Derek shaking my hand with the firm grip of someone who'd successfully managed a difficult negotiation. I stood at the window, watching Derek's BMW disappear down our tree-lined street, past houses that cost more than most people's annual salaries, through a neighborhood that represented the kind of quiet wealth Derek's Tish family apparently considered insufficient for their social standards. My phone buzzed with a text from my property manager. Grandview Estate booking confirmed for Patterson wedding. March 15th. Full venue rental, premium package $85,000 total. Should I proceed with standard preparations? I stared at the message for a long moment, understanding finally clicking into place like the last piece of a puzzle I'd been solving unconsciously for months. Amanda and Derek's wedding, the social event of the season, the venue that would establish their standing among Derek's family's sophisticated social circle. The venue I had owned for 15 years. I typed back, hold all preparations pending further instructions. I need to review the contract personally. Understood. Anything specific I should watch for? I looked around my living room, taking in the understated elegance that Amanda had dismissed as middle class, the artwork she'd never bothered to research, the furniture whose provenance she'd never questioned. Just making sure we understand exactly who our clients are, I replied. The next 3 weeks passed in remarkable calm. Amanda called twice to update me on wedding details I wouldn't be witnessing, her voice bright with the excitement of someone planning the social event that would transform her life. Derek sent a formal invitation to the ceremony only, beautifully engraved cardstock that managed to feel both inclusive and dismissive. I spent the time reviewing my business holdings with my accountant, something I did quarterly but never discussed with Amanda. The construction company she knew about represented perhaps 5% of my actual enterprises. The other 95% included commercial real estate, hospitality investments, and a carefully diversified portfolio that generated more passive income than most people earned annually, including ownership of 7 upscale event venues throughout the region. The Grandview estate was simply the crown jewel of a collection I'd built over 2 decades of strategic acquisitions. The Patterson wedding contract is interesting, my attorney mentioned during our regular Friday meeting. Full premium package, but the groom's family insisted on some unusual clauses. What kind of clauses? Complete control over the guest list, including the right to exclude people they deem inappropriate for the venue standards. They actually want to approve our staff assignments based on social compatibility. I raised an eyebrow. Social compatibility? Their exact words were, ensuring all personnel reflect the sophisticated atmosphere appropriate to our social circle. He chuckled. Honestly, Robert, in 30 years of contract law, I've never seen such entitled language. And we agreed to these terms? Your property manager signed off on everything. The additional fees for their special requirements brought the total to nearly $100,000. $100,000. Derek's family was paying me $100,000 for the privilege of excluding me from my daughter's wedding reception. There's one more thing, my attorney continued. They've requested that the venue owner not be present during the event. Apparently, they consider business ownership a form of service industry labor that might compromise their social standing. The irony was perfect. Derek's family, so concerned with social hierarchy, wanted to ensure that the man who owned their venue remained invisible during their celebration. They were literally paying me to stay away from an event in my own property. How unfortunate for them, I said quietly. Should I have our manager accommodate their request? I thought about Amanda's excitement, her dreams of social acceptance, her conviction that marrying Derek would secure her place in a world she'd been desperate to join. I thought about Derek's casual dismissal of my achievements, his family's standards for social acceptability, their determination to control every aspect of their wedding celebration. No, I said finally. I think I'll be attending this wedding after all. The morning of March 15th dawned crisp and clear. Perfect weather for the social event of the season. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the charcoal gray Armani that Amanda had never seen, because I reserved it for board meetings and formal business occasions. At 11:30, I drove to the Grandview estate, arriving 3 hours before the ceremony to review final preparations. The venue looked spectacular, exactly as Derek's family had requested. Crystal chandeliers sparkled in the marble ballroom. Fresh flowers filled every corner with color and fragrance. The 7-course menu had been prepared by our award-winning culinary team. Everything looks perfect, my event manager reported. The Patterson party should be arriving for photos in about an hour. Excellent work, Maria. You've outdone yourself. She beamed with professional pride. This wedding party was very specific about their requirements, but we've delivered exactly what they ordered. At 12:15, Derek's family arrived in a convoy of luxury vehicles, followed by professional photographers and a videography team. Through my office window, I watched them emerge like actors taking their positions for an elaborate performance. Derek looked handsome in his custom tuxedo. His parents moved with the confident authority of people accustomed to commanding attention and deference. His mother's jewelry caught the sunlight like captured stars. Amanda arrived 30 minutes later in a white Rolls-Royce, her wedding dress flowing behind her like liquid moonlight. Even from a distance, I could see the happiness radiating from her face. This was her moment, her transformation from my simple daughter into Derek's sophisticated wife. At 1:45, I walked from my office to the garden where the ceremony would take place. Guests filled white chairs arranged in perfect rows, their conversation creating the pleasant murmur of social anticipation. I took a seat in the back row, noting the careful arrangement of Derek's family on the right side and the notably smaller contingent of Amanda's friends on the left. Amanda's side looked sparse. Most of her childhood friends had been gradually excluded from her social circle, as she'd pursued her relationship with Derek. The few remaining guests looked uncomfortable in their formal attire, clearly aware that they were participating in something beyond their usual social sphere. Derek's side presented a different picture entirely. 300 guests in designer clothing, their conversation peppered with references to vacation homes, cultural events, and business deals that casually mentioned millions of dollars. This was the world Amanda wanted to join, the society she deemed more valuable than her relationship with her father. At 2 o'clock precisely, the ceremony began. Amanda walked down the aisle alone, having decided that her father's escort would compromise the sophisticated image she wanted to project. She looked beautiful, radiant, with the confidence of someone who'd achieved her life's ambition. The vows were traditional but personalized, Derek promising to provide Amanda with the social standing and cultural sophistication she deserved. Amanda promised to honor Derek's family's values and maintain the standards of excellence they represented. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was polite but enthusiastic. The photography session that followed was extensive, capturing every angle of the couple, the venue, and the carefully curated guest list. At 3:30, the reception began in the marble ballroom. I remained in my office, watching through security cameras as Derek's family's social event unfolded exactly as they'd planned. The 7-course dinner proceeded flawlessly. The live orchestra performed with professional precision. Speeches were given praising Derek's family's generosity and vision. No one mentioned the bride's father. At 4:15, my phone rang. "Robert, this is James Patterson, Derek's father. I need to speak with you immediately." "Good afternoon, Mr. Patterson. What can I do for you?" "There's been some kind of mistake. The venue manager just informed me that you're present on the property during our wedding. We specifically requested that all business ownership remain invisible during our event." "I see. And why does my presence concern you?" "Because this is a sophisticated social gathering, not a business meeting. We paid premium fees specifically to ensure appropriate atmosphere control." "Atmosphere control," I repeated. "How exactly does my presence compromise your atmosphere?" "Mr. Hartwell, I'm sure you're a fine person, but you operate in the construction industry. Our guests represent financial services, cultural leadership, philanthropic organizations. The social dynamics are simply incompatible." "I understand. You're concerned that my presence might somehow contaminate your sophisticated gathering." "I wouldn't put it that way, but essentially yes. We need you to remain out of sight for the remainder of the event." I looked through my office window at the reception in progress, at Amanda dancing with her new husband, at Derek's family basking in the social success of their perfectly orchestrated celebration. "Mr. Patterson," I said quietly, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "You seem to believe that you're in a position to make demands about my presence at the Grandview estate." "Of course I am. We're paying your venue fees. We're your clients." "Actually," I said, "you're my guests." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "What do you mean?" he asked finally. "I mean that I don't just work at the Grandview estate, Mr. Patterson. I own it." The silence this time was absolute. "I also own 6 other premium venues throughout the region, along with a portfolio of commercial real estate that includes the downtown building where your financial services firm rents its offices." "That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's quite possible. In fact, it's been true for 15 years, during which time your family has been paying me tens of thousands of dollars annually in various rental and service fees." "You're lying." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the property deed, along with my business portfolio summary. "I'm sending you documentation right now. You'll find that Robert Hartwell Construction represents perhaps 5% of my business holdings. The rest include the venue where you're currently celebrating your son's wedding." My phone buzzed with a text confirmation that the documents had been transmitted. This changes nothing, Patterson said, his voice strained. You still can't just appear at our private event. Actually, I can appear anywhere I choose on my own property, but that's not why I called. You called me. Did I? I think you'll find that you called me, demanding that I make myself invisible during your son's wedding celebration. What do you want? I looked out at the reception again, watching Amanda laugh with Derek's family, her face glowing with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully integrated herself into a social circle she deemed superior to her own family. I want you to understand something, Mr. Patterson. 26 years ago, I held my daughter in my arms for the first time. I promised her mother, who died when Amanda was 12, that I would provide everything our daughter needed to succeed in life. This is hardly relevant to... I kept that promise. Private schools, college education, every opportunity money could buy. I also promised that I would love her unconditionally, support her choices, and be present for every important moment in her life. Mr. Hartwell, if this is about attending the reception, this is about understanding that your son married my daughter, not a social climber without family connections. My daughter. Your daughter chose to limit your involvement in today's celebration. My daughter chose to exclude her father from her wedding reception because your family convinced her that I wasn't socially acceptable. Patterson's breathing was audible through the phone. Perhaps we can discuss this reasonably. We are discussing it reasonably. I'm informing you that the man you deemed unfit for your son's social circle owns the property where you're celebrating, employs the staff serving you dinner, and generates more annual income than your financial services firm reported in its last public filing. How do you know about our public filings? Because I research my tenants carefully before signing lease agreements. Your downtown office building? Mine. The parking garage your employees use? Also mine. The catering company preparing your 7-course dinner? I own that too. The silence was profound. What do you want? Patterson asked again, his voice smaller now. I want you to consider whether your social standards might need adjustment. I want you to think about whether judging people by their perceived social standing, rather than their actual character and achievements, might be a flawed approach to human relationships. And if we don't adjust our standards? I looked at the reception one more time. Amanda was dancing with Derek, surrounded by his family's friends and business associates, living her dream of social acceptance and sophisticated society. Then you continue enjoying your celebration, I said, all of it paid for with money earned by a simple businessman you deemed unworthy of attending his daughter's wedding reception. I hung up before he could respond. At 5:30, I left my office and walked through the marble ballroom, past the crystal chandeliers and fresh flowers, past the guests who represented the social circle Amanda had chosen over her relationship with her father. She saw me from across the room, her face cycling through surprise, confusion, and dawning realization. Derek appeared at her side, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he processed my presence. I approached their table slowly, noting how the conversation around us grew quiet as Derek's family and friends recognized the man they'd excluded from the celebration. Amanda, I said when I reached her chair, you look beautiful. Dad, she whispered, what are you doing here? Witnessing my daughter's wedding reception, I said simply. Congratulations to both of you. Derek stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Mr. Hartwell, this is inappropriate. You weren't invited to the reception. You're right, I agreed. I wasn't invited. But fortunately, I didn't need an invitation. What does that mean? I looked around the ballroom, taking in the elegant decorations, the expensive catering, the sophisticated guests who'd spent the afternoon celebrating Derek and Amanda's union while specifically excluding her father. It means this is my property, I said quietly. Every chandelier, every marble column, every flower arrangement you see around you belongs to me." Amanda's face went white. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's quite true. I've owned the Grandview estate for 15 years. Your reception is taking place in my ballroom, catered by my staff, decorated with my flowers." Derek's mouth opened and closed without sound. Around us, the carefully orchestrated conversation of sophisticated society had stopped entirely. "You lied to us," Amanda whispered. "You said you were just a simple businessman." "I said my work was different from Derek's family's enterprises. That was true. I also said I understood your position about social acceptability. That was also true." James Patterson appeared at Derek's shoulder, his face grim with the realization that his family's social event had become something else entirely. "Mr. Hartwell," he said carefully, "perhaps we could discuss this privately." "We could," I agreed, "but I think the discussion might be more valuable if conducted publicly. Your guests might be interested to learn about the social standards that guided tonight's celebration." "What social standards?" Amanda asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Well, Mike, the standards that determined your father wasn't sophisticated enough to attend your wedding reception," I said. "The standards that classified me as a simple businessman whose presence might embarrass your new family." The ballroom had grown silent enough to hear the crystal chandeliers chiming softly in the evening breeze. "Dad," Amanda said, her voice breaking, "I didn't know." "Know what, sweetheart?" "That you owned all this. That you were successful enough to meet your new family's standards for social acceptability." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "The question isn't whether I was successful enough for their standards," I said gently. "The question is whether their standards were appropriate for judging your father." Derek stepped forward, his face flushed with humiliation. "Mr. Hartwell, we made a mistake. Obviously, we didn't understand your business background." "No," I said. "You didn't understand that business success and social worth aren't determined by the sophistication of one's conversation topics or the exclusivity of one's social circle. But now that we know—" "Now that you know what?" I interrupted. "That I'm wealthy enough to warrant inclusion in your family's social events? That I own property you consider prestigious enough to host your celebrations?" The silence was complete. "The man you excluded from this reception is exactly the same person I was 3 hours ago," I continued. "The same person who raised Amanda, supported her education, and loved her unconditionally for 26 years. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my net worth." Amanda stood up slowly, her wedding dress rustling against the marble floor. "Daddy, I'm so sorry." "I know you are, sweetheart. Can you forgive me?" I looked at my daughter, beautiful in her wedding dress, surrounded by the social circle she'd chosen over her relationship with her father. Behind her stood Derek and his family, their faces showing the uncomfortable realization that their social standards had led them to exclude someone whose success exceeded their own. "Amanda," I said finally, "I love you unconditionally. I always have and I always will. But forgiveness and reconciliation are different things." "What does that mean?" "It means I forgive you for choosing Derek's family's approval over your father's feelings. But I can't pretend that choice doesn't reveal something important about your values and priorities." "I can change," she whispered. "We can fix this." "Can you? Can you really change the fact that you were willing to exclude your father from your wedding celebration because someone else's opinion mattered more than his presence?" "Yes," she said desperately. "Yes, I can change that." I looked around the ballroom one more time, taking in the faces of Derek's family and friends, the sophisticated social circle that had been so important to Amanda that she'd sacrificed her relationship with her father to gain their acceptance. "I hope you can," I said. "I genuinely hope you can." "Then you'll give me another chance." "I'll always give you chances, Amanda, but I won't pretend that tonight didn't happen. I won't pretend that you didn't choose social status over family loyalty, and I won't enable you to make similar choices in the future. Derek stepped forward, his face earnest with the practiced sincerity I'd seen before. Mr. Hartwell, my family and I would like to make this right. We clearly misjudged your background and social standing. You didn't misjudge my social standing, I said. You misjudged the importance of social standing as a measure of human worth. Warts, but we understand now. Do you? Do you really understand that the problem wasn't my lack of sophistication, but your use of sophistication as a weapon to exclude people you deemed unworthy? Patterson cleared his throat. Perhaps we could start over, begin building a relationship based on accurate information about everyone's background and achievements. A relationship based on my net worth rather than my character. Based on mutual respect and understanding. Respect, I repeated. The same respect you showed when you demanded that I remain invisible during your son's wedding celebration? The questions hung in the air like accusations, which perhaps they were. Mr. Hartwell, Patterson said finally, we made mistakes. We're willing to acknowledge that and move forward constructively. I looked at Amanda, whose tears had smeared her carefully applied makeup, leaving tracks down her cheeks like evidence of the evening's emotional devastation. Moving forward constructively, I said. What would that look like? Like family, Amanda whispered. Like the family we should have been tonight. The family that includes your father in important celebrations? Yes. The family that doesn't judge people based on perceived social standing? Yes. The family that values character over social credentials? Yes, Daddy. Yes to all of it. I studied her face, looking for the little girl who'd once drawn stick figure families where everyone held hands and smiled. That child was still there, buried beneath layers of social ambition and misguided priorities, but still there. Then we'll see, I said. We'll see if you can rebuild the family relationships you sacrificed for social acceptance. Thank you, she breathed. Don't thank me yet, Amanda. Rebuilding trust takes time. Proving that your values have changed requires consistent action over months and years, not words spoken at a moment of crisis. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand that the father you excluded from your wedding reception will never forget that his daughter considered him socially unacceptable? Her face crumpled. I can't change what I did. No, I agreed. You can't. But you can change what you do next. I looked around the ballroom one final time at the sophisticated social gathering that had been designed to exclude me, taking place in my own property with my own staff and resources. Enjoy the rest of your reception, I said. All of you. Consider it my wedding gift to the happy couple. I walked away slowly, past the crystal chandeliers and marble columns, past the guests who'd spent the evening celebrating Derek and Amanda's union while specifically excluding her father. At the ballroom entrance, I turned back for one last look at my daughter, dancing with her new husband in the venue I owned, surrounded by people whose approval she'd valued more than her relationship with her father. The irony was perfect, but it tasted bitter rather than sweet. Outside, the March evening was cool and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I drove home through the quiet suburbs, past houses that represented the kind of modest success Derek's family had deemed insufficient for their social standards. At home, I sat in my reading chair with a glass of whiskey and my phone, scrolling through the messages that had accumulated during the evening. 3 missed calls from Amanda, 2 texts apologizing and begging me to call her back. I set the phone aside and looked around my living room, taking in the understated elegance that Amanda had dismissed as middle-class suburban. Tomorrow, she would begin learning about the man she'd excluded from her wedding reception. The business empire he'd built quietly over 4 decades. The success he'd achieved without needing anyone's social approval. But tonight, I simply sat in the chair she'd wanted me to replace, drinking whiskey in the house she'd considered insufficiently sophisticated, thinking about the daughter who'd chosen social status over family loyalty, and wondering if she'd ever understand what she'd lost. The phone rang at 11:30. Amanda's name appeared on the caller ID, but I let it ring. We would talk eventually, but not tonight. Tonight was for processing what had happened, for understanding that the little girl who'd once drawn pictures of our family holding hands had grown into someone who considered her father's presence at her wedding reception a social liability. Outside my window, the suburban neighborhood slept peacefully, unaware that one of its residents had spent the evening discovering that his daughter's love came with conditions he'd never imagined. Tomorrow would bring conversations about reconciliation and rebuilding trust. Tonight was for grieving the family relationship that had ended when Amanda decided Derek's family's approval mattered more than her father's feelings. I finished my whiskey and turned off the lights, walking upstairs to the bedroom in the house Amanda had considered too modest for her sophisticated lifestyle. In 3 hours, she would begin learning about the empire her father had built while she'd been busy judging him insufficient for her social circle. But that was tomorrow's revelation. Tonight was for accepting that money could buy many things, including beautiful wedding venues and sophisticated celebrations, but it couldn't purchase a daughter's loyalty or respect. So, those had to be freely given and freely chosen. Amanda had made her choice. Now she would live with the consequences. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.